There's a moment in some people's lives where everything looks fine from the outside. The career is stable, the home is comfortable, the routine is predictable, but inside there's a question that won't go away. And when that question becomes louder than the life you've built, something has to give. This is the story of a man who had to choose between the life he was supposed to want and the one he couldn't stop thinking about. His name was Daniel. He was 37 years old, living in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. He worked as a project manager for a logistics company, decent salary, benefits, a corner cubicle with a window view of the parking lot. It wasn't glamorous, but it was secure. And security, he'd been told his whole life, was what mattered. Daniel had a routine. Wake up at 6:15, coffee, shower, leave by 7:30 to beat traffic. 8 hours at the office, sometimes 9. Home by 6, dinner, TV, bed by 11. Weekends were for errands, yard work, maybe a movie with his girlfriend Rachel. Rachel was a teacher. They'd been together for 4 years. She wanted to get married. She'd started leaving wedding magazines on the coffee table, casually mentioning venues when they drove past churches. Daniel would nod and say, "Yeah, that's nice," but the words felt like they belonged to someone else. From the outside, Daniel's life looked like success. He had a 401k, a reliable car, a 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors. His parents were proud. His friends from college, the ones who still kept in touch, seemed envious when they compared notes at the occasional reunion. But somewhere around his mid-30s, Daniel started noticing something. A hollowness. Not dramatic, not a crisis, just a quiet sense that he was watching his own life happen instead of living it. He'd sit in meetings, nodding along to discussions about quarterly projections and supply chain optimization, and realize he hadn't actually heard a word anyone said. He'd look at Rachel across the dinner table and feel affection, but not passion. Not the kind of connection that made him want to stay up all night talking. He told himself this was normal. This was adulthood. This was what stability felt like. The excitement of your 20s fades. You settle into responsibility. You grow up. But the feeling didn't go away. It got worse on Sundays. Sunday evenings specifically. That window between 6 and 9 p.m. when the weekend was ending and the work week was beginning again. Daniel would sit on his couch, remote in hand, flipping through channels without watching anything, and feel a weight in his chest he couldn't explain. He tried to fix it in small ways. He joined a gym, lasted 3 weeks. He started learning guitar from YouTube tutorials. The guitar sat in the corner after a month, gathering dust. He and Rachel took a vacation to Colorado. Beautiful mountains, nice hotels. But even there, standing at a scenic overlook with his arm around her, Daniel felt like he was performing the role of someone on vacation rather than actually experiencing it. He didn't talk about this with anyone. What would he even say? "I have everything I'm supposed to want, but I feel empty?" It sounded ungrateful, privileged, like the kind of complaint people roll their eyes at, so he kept it to himself. He went to work. He smiled at Rachel. He mowed the lawn. He answered good when people asked how he was. And all the while, underneath everything, there was a question growing louder. Is this it? Not in an entitled way, not in a "I deserve more" way. Just a genuine, aching question. Is this all there is? This routine, this predictability, this slow march toward retirement, and then what? Daniel started noticing other people, not in a judgmental way, but with curiosity. The barista at his coffee shop who talked about saving up to travel to Southeast Asia. His younger co-worker who quit to start a carpentry business. An old friend from high school who'd moved to Portland and was teaching pottery classes. These weren't people with perfect lives. They had struggles, uncertainties, financial stress, but they had something Daniel didn't. They seemed present, like they'd chosen their lives instead of defaulting into them. One night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He got up at 2 a.m., went to his laptop, and started typing into a search bar. He didn't even know what he was looking for at first. Career change? New hobbies? Purpose? He found himself on a forum for people who'd made major life changes in their 30s and 40s. He read for hours. Stories of people who'd left secure jobs to pursue passions, people who'd ended long-term relationships that weren't right, people who'd moved across the country with no plan except a need for something different. Some of the stories ended well, some didn't. But all of them had one thing in common. The person had made a choice, an active, intentional choice to change direction. Daniel closed his laptop at 4 a.m. He went back to bed but didn't sleep. He lay there in the dark, listening to Rachel breathe beside him, and felt the weight of his own life pressing down on him. Something had to change. He knew it. He'd known it for a while, but knowing something and doing something are very different things. The weeks after that sleepless night were strange. Daniel felt like he was living in two realities at once. On the surface, everything continued as normal, but underneath, something was shifting. He started paying attention to moments he'd previously glossed over. Like when his boss, Greg, talked about the 10-year plan for the company. Greg was 52, still doing the same job he'd been doing for 15 years, talking about the 10-year plan like it was an adventure instead of a repeat of the last 15. Daniel looked at Greg and saw his own future, and it terrified him. Or when Rachel brought up engagement rings. They were at a friend's wedding, and on the drive home she said, "Did you see Sarah's ring? I think I'd want something simpler." More classic. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He managed to say, "Yeah, that makes sense." But inside, panic rose in his throat. He loved Rachel, or he thought he did, but love had started to feel like obligation, comfort, the path of least resistance, and that realization made him feel like a terrible person. He started going for walks after work, long walks, sometimes for an hour or more, telling Rachel he needed the exercise. He'd walk through neighborhoods he didn't usually see, past houses with lit windows and lives he knew nothing about, and wonder what it would feel like to be someone else, to have made different choices. One evening, he walked past a community center and saw a flyer for an evening pottery class. Something about it stuck with him. He'd always liked working with his hands, but he'd never pursued it. Too impractical, not a real career, a hobby at best. But the thought wouldn't leave him alone. The next week he signed up. He didn't tell Rachel. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because he knew she'd ask questions he didn't have answers to. He just said he was going to the gym. The pottery class was in a drafty studio that smelled like wet clay and kiln smoke. There were 6 other students, all different ages. The instructor, a woman named Maria, who was probably in her 60s, had clay under her fingernails in a calm, unhurried way of speaking. Daniel was terrible at pottery. His first bowl collapsed. His second one was lopsided. But for 2 hours every Wednesday evening, he forgot about work, forgot about the Sunday dread, forgot about the question mark hanging over his relationship. He just focused on the clay, the wheel, the satisfying resistance of shaping something with his hands. After the 4th class, Maria asked him to stay behind for a moment. Daniel tensed, thinking he'd done something wrong, but she just smiled and said, "You have good instincts. You should keep coming." It was such a small comment, but Daniel felt something crack open inside him. When was the last time someone had told him he was good at something? Not competent, not reliable, not meeting expectations, but actually good at something with potential to grow? He started thinking about pottery more, looking at ceramics online, watching videos about different techniques. It was absurd, really. He was 37 years old with a corporate job and a girlfriend who wanted to get married. Pottery wasn't going to change his life, but it felt like an opening, a small door he'd walk through, and on the other side was a reminder that he was capable of learning, creating, feeling excited about something. Meanwhile, work became harder to tolerate. It wasn't that the job got worse, it was exactly the same. That was the problem. Daniel sat in meetings and thought about clay. He looked at spreadsheets and wondered what his life would look like if he actually pursued something he cared about instead of something that paid the bills. His relationship with Rachel started to show strain. She could sense something was off, even if she couldn't name it. She'd ask if he was okay, and he'd say yes, and they'd both know he was lying. The conversations got shorter. The silences got longer. They still went through the motions: dinner, TV, occasional sex. But the warmth was fading. One Saturday morning, Rachel brought it up directly. They were having coffee in the kitchen, and she said, "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" Daniel looked at her across the table. This woman he'd spent 4 years with, who loved him, who wanted a future with him. And he couldn't bring himself to say what he was really thinking, that he didn't know if he wanted that future, that he felt trapped, that he was scared he was wasting both of their lives by staying in something that felt more like comfort than love. Instead, he said, "I'm just stressed about work." She reached across and squeezed his hand. "We should plan a trip. Get away for a weekend." He nodded. "Yeah, that sounds good." But he knew a weekend trip wouldn't fix what was broken, because the problem wasn't work stress or needing a vacation. The problem was that Daniel had spent his entire adult life following a script: college, career, relationship, marriage, kids, retirement. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped asking if the script was actually what he wanted. And now at 37, the question wouldn't be quiet anymore. The decision didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a dramatic, lightning bolt moment. It was quieter than that, more gradual. Daniel kept going to pottery class. He got better. Not great, but competent enough that Maria asked if he'd ever considered taking it more seriously. "There's a studio across town that offers intensive workshops," she said. "If you wanted to learn more, you could probably get pretty good." The thought was absurd. He couldn't just become a potter. That wasn't realistic. He had bills, responsibilities. You don't throw away a stable career to play with clay. But the thought stayed with him. Around that same time, something happened at work. His company announced a restructuring. No layoffs, they said, but roles were being redefined. Daniel's manager pulled him aside and told him they wanted him to take on more responsibility. A promotion, technically, but more hours, more stress, more years of doing exactly what he'd been doing, but with a fancier title. He was supposed to feel grateful. This was what people worked toward: advancement, recognition. Daniel asked for a few days to think about it. His manager looked confused but said, "Okay." That night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment. Rachel was at a friend's baby shower. He made a list on a piece of paper, 2 columns: stay or go, stay, security, income, health insurance, Rachel, the life he'd built, the expectations of everyone who knew him, go, uncertainty, fear, potential failure. But also, and this was what scared him most, the possibility of feeling alive again. He stared at that piece of paper for a long time. The logical choice was obvious: stay. Of course, stay. Only an idiot would throw away stability for a vague sense of dissatisfaction and a pottery hobby. But then Daniel asked himself a different question. If he stayed, what would his life look like in 5 years? 10 years? He'd be further up the corporate ladder, maybe married, maybe with kids, comfortable, secure, and absolutely hollow. He thought about the version of himself at 47, still sitting in the same kind of meetings, still feeling that Sunday night dread, still wondering what might have happened if he'd had the courage to choose differently. And he realized something. He was already afraid. He'd been afraid for years, afraid of making the wrong choice, of disappointing people, of failing, of not having enough. That fear had kept him in place, making safe choices, building a life that looked good but felt empty. What if instead of being afraid of change, he became more afraid of staying the same? The decision crystallized in that moment, not confidently, not with certainty that it would work out, but with a quiet, bone-deep knowing that he had to try. He couldn't stay. The next morning, Daniel declined the promotion. He told his manager he needed to make a career change, that he appreciated the opportunity, but it wasn't the right direction for him. His manager looked at him like he'd lost his mind. That evening, he sat down with Rachel. This conversation was harder. He cared about her. He didn't want to hurt her, but he couldn't keep pretending. "I don't think I can do this," he said. She looked up from her phone. "Do what?" "This. Us. The life we've been building. I'm not happy, Rachel, and I don't think I'm making you happy either." The conversation that followed was painful. She cried. She got angry. She asked if there was someone else. There wasn't. She asked if this was about the wedding, the pressure. It was and it wasn't. In the end, she said, "So what? You're just going to throw away 4 years because you're having some kind of midlife crisis?" Daniel thought about that. "Maybe," he said quietly. Or maybe I'm finally admitting that I've been going through the motions for longer than I want to. She left to stay at her sister's that night. Daniel sat in the suddenly too quiet apartment and felt the full weight of what he'd just done. He just dismantled his entire life, and he had no idea what came next. The weeks after the breakup were some of the hardest of Daniel's life, not because he regretted the decision, though there were moments he questioned it, but because of what came with it. Loneliness first. The apartment felt enormous without Rachel. All her things were gone, her books, her plants, her half of the closet. Daniel would come home from work and the silence was oppressive. He'd gotten so used to her presence that he didn't realize how much of his daily life was shared till it wasn't anymore. Then there was the judgment. His parents were confused and disappointed. "You had a good job," his mother said over the phone, "and Rachel was such a nice girl. What are you thinking?" He didn't have a good answer for her. "I needed a change," sounded weak. Selfish. His friends were split. Some were supportive in a cautious way. Others clearly thought he was making a mistake. One friend, Mike, said over beers, "Look, man, everyone gets bored sometimes. You don't blow up your whole life over it. You push through." But that was the thing Daniel was realizing. He'd been pushing through for years, and pushing through had gotten him to 37 years old and empty. The scariest part was the uncertainty. Daniel had quit his job without another one lined up. He had some savings, enough for maybe 6 months if he was careful. But then what? He spent his days applying for jobs, but nothing felt right. Going back to project management felt like admitting defeat. But what else was he qualified for? He kept going to pottery class. It was the one constant, the one thing that still felt good. Maria could tell something had changed in his life. He was there more often, staying later, asking more questions. One evening, she asked him directly, "What's going on with you?" Daniel told her everything. The breakup, the job, the feeling of having torn down his life without knowing how to build a new one. Maria listened quietly. When he finished, she said, "You know, I was a lawyer for 20 years. Hated it. Left when I was 45. Everyone thought I was crazy." Daniel stared at her. "You were a lawyer?" She smiled. "Corporate law, made good money, was absolutely miserable. Took a pottery class on a whim, fell in love with it, and eventually decided to see if I could make it work. That was 18 years ago." "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked. Maria thought for a moment. "There were times I wasn't sure I'd make it. Financially, emotionally, it was hard. But no, I don't regret it, because I chose it. That's the difference. I chose this life instead of defaulting into one I didn't want." That conversation stayed with Daniel. He wasn't sure he could make pottery a career. That still felt like a fantasy. But maybe the point wasn't having it all figured out. Maybe the point was moving towards something he actually cared about instead of away from something he didn't. He took the intensive workshop Maria had mentioned. It was 2 weeks, full-time, immersive. He used some of his savings to pay for it. His parents thought he was insane. But those 2 weeks were the most present Daniel had felt in years. He worked with clay for 8 hours a day. His hands ached. His back hurt. He made mistakes, ruined pieces, got frustrated. But he also improved. He learned techniques. He started to see himself as someone who could actually do this, not just dabble. At the end of the workshop, the instructor pulled him aside. "You've got something. If you wanted to pursue this, I know a few galleries that work with emerging ceramicists. No promises, but I could make introductions." Daniel's heart pounded. Was this real? Could this actually be a path forward? He decided to try. He set up a small workspace in his apartment. A wheel, a kiln, tools. He started creating pieces consistently. He built a basic website. He reached out to the galleries the instructor had mentioned. It was terrifying. Most days he felt like a fraud, a 38-year-old man playing artist instead of having a real job. His savings dwindled. He took on some freelance project management work to make ends meet, which felt like a step backward but was necessary. Some weeks he sold nothing. Other weeks he'd sell a bowl or a vase, and it felt like a miracle. He started going to therapy, not because he was in crisis, but because he needed someone to talk to who wasn't his disappointed parents or his skeptical friends. His therapist asked him hard questions, like, "What are you really afraid of?" Daniel thought about it. Failing, running out of money, proving everyone right that I made a stupid decision. And what if you do fail? She asked. What's the worst that happens? I go back to a regular job, Daniel admitted. Older, broker, having wasted time. Would that be the end of your life? No. So you'd survive? Yeah. Then what are you actually afraid of? Daniel realized the answer. That I'll try my hardest and it still won't be enough. That I'll chase this thing I care about and find out I'm not good enough. And if you don't try? Daniel didn't have an answer for that, because not trying meant spending the rest of his life wondering, and that suddenly felt worse than failure. A year passed, then another. Daniel's life didn't transform overnight. There was no sudden success, no viral moment that changed everything. But gradually things shifted. He got better at pottery. His work matured. He developed a style, simple, functional pieces with subtle texture and earthy glazes. A few local galleries started carrying his work. He did craft fairs on weekends. The income was inconsistent, but it was income. More importantly, he felt different, not happy all the time. Life was still hard, uncertain, sometimes lonely, but he felt present, like he was inhabiting his own life instead of watching it happen. He started dating again, cautiously, a woman named Lauren who ran a bookshop. They moved slowly. She appreciated that he was figuring his life out, that he didn't have all the answers. They'd spend Sunday mornings at farmers markets, talking about books and ceramics and what it meant to build a life that felt authentic. Daniel's relationship with his parents slowly improved. They still didn't fully understand his choices, but they could see he was okay. Not rich, not climbing a corporate ladder, but okay. His mother even bought one of his bowls and put it in her kitchen. He reconnected with some old friends who'd also made unconventional choices. They formed a loose community, people in their late 30s and early 40s who'd stepped off the traditional path and were figuring it out as they went. The financial anxiety never fully went away. Daniel still had months where he wondered if he'd be able to make rent. He took on freelance work when he needed to, swallowed his pride, did what he had to do. But here's what changed. He stopped measuring his life by external markers of success. The right job title, the right relationship status, the right amount of money in his 401k. Instead, he started asking different questions. Am I growing? Am I creating things that matter to me? Am I being honest about what I want? The answers weren't always yes, but he was asking. One evening, about 2 years after leaving his corporate job, Daniel was in his studio. He just finished loading the kiln with a new batch of pieces. His hands were covered in clay. His back ached from hunching over the wheel all day. He stood there in the quiet studio and thought about the version of himself from 3 years ago, sitting in that corner cubicle, going through the motions, feeling hollow. He wouldn't go back, not for any amount of security or approval, because here's what Daniel had learned. The safe choice isn't always the right choice. Sometimes safety is just another word for staying stuck. He thought about all the people still sitting in jobs they hate, staying in relationships that don't fulfill them, following scripts they never chose. And he felt a deep compassion for them because he'd been there. He knew how hard it was to leave, how scary, how much easier it was to stay. But he also knew what it cost to stay too long. Daniel's life wasn't perfect. He didn't have everything figured out. He still had hard days, doubts, moments of wondering if he'd made the right choice. But he'd made a choice, an active, intentional choice to step into uncertainty rather than hide in comfort. And that made all the difference. Daniel's story isn't finished. At 40, he's still building a life that feels true to who he is. Some days are easier than others. Some months are financially tighter than he'd like. He doesn't have all the answers, but he has something he didn't have 3 years ago. Agency. The sense that he's authoring his own life instead of living someone else's expectations. The question Daniel asked himself, is this all there is one many people face. Maybe you're facing it right now. The creeping sense that your life looks fine from the outside but feels hollow on the inside. If you are, Daniel's story offers not a solution, but permission. Permission to admit when something isn't working. Permission to want something different, even if you can't name what it is yet. Permission to choose discomfort and uncertainty over safe misery. The transformation isn't about becoming successful or rich or famous. It's about becoming present, about living a life you chose instead of one you defaulted into. So here's the question Daniel would ask you. If he could, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Not what should you do, not what makes sense, but what would you actually do if fear wasn't holding you back? You don't have to answer right now. You don't have to quit your job tomorrow or blow up your life. But maybe just sit with that question for a while. Because the biggest risk isn't making the wrong choice. It's spending your whole life wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to choose at all. If Daniel's story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What's one decision you've been avoiding out of fear? You don't have to share specifics. Even just acknowledging it to yourself is a start. This channel is dedicated to telling real stories about real people facing real crossroads. No hype, no overnight transformations, just honest human experiences that might help you navigate your own path. If you want more stories like this, stories that make you think, reflect, and maybe see your own life a little differently, subscribe and turn on notifications. New stories every week. And if someone you know is wrestling with a difficult decision, share this video with them. Sometimes we just need to hear that someone else walked through the fear and came out the other side. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions. They're the ones worth answering.